Let's start. The first question. Again, if you see, the question was on a basic or very simple question. Only thing that you needed to know was the Supreme Court judgments related to the federalism. Okay. Only the court judgment were to be provided, but the framing of the question is such that थोड़ा सा structuring में आपका issue आ सकता था. ठीक है. So basically, the question is about distribution of legislative powers. Okay. So as far as the legislative powers are concerned, it basically comes from the seventh schedule, right? So your introduction also has to be seventh schedule. Secondly, you had the different quotes of the scholars in the X factor. So based upon those scholar quotes, you need to pick one. Because basically, this is talking about federal supremacy and harmonious construction. So you can go for either the federal supremacy or the centralizing tendency related quote, or the Rajiv Bhargava quote, where Indian federalism is multi-layered. Both of any one of these two would have sufficed. So introduction quote, Ivor Jennings quote you can go, and then seventh schedule. Okay, that should have been your structure. Then first you mentioned the principle of federal supremacy. So what does it mean? Principle of federal supremacy basically means the center having greater power over states. If you want, you could have drawn your diagram. You could have given heading in this way also. Okay. Under it, you simply have to write the constitutional provisions. Okay. And SC judgments. Okay. This would have been the standard structure. But again, to bring the X factor, now what I am telling you is the most important aspect, or it is a standard format that I found across the toppers answers, is that whenever the question contains the concepts, so federal supremacy हो या harmonious construction, ठीक है, if not in introduction, if you are addressing that as a part of main body, after the heading, always provide the definition of that concept. Okay, हमेशा याद रखना ही है. Suppose if it is not possible into the introduction आपने दूसरा दिया है, but heading is you are talking about any concept, always first define that concept. So पहले आपका फेडरल सुप्रीमेसी का डेफिनेशन आएगा, then constitutional provisions, then Supreme Court judgments. Same with second. So distribution of this. The second part is the harmonious construction. Okay. Here harmonious construction may be diagram, center into states, where there is the balancing. Okay. Again, definition, provisions, judgments. Okay. This should be your main part. And at the end, briefly, because the directive is explained, we'll go with 80-20. So either you can highlight the issues and way forward in the table, way forward, or you can simply provide way forward. Both are fine. Okay. Now, remember this. This diagram that I am giving, you can use it across the federalism related questions. One, federal supremacy. What will be the opposite of federal supremacy in Indian federalism? It will be state autonomy, right? On the one hand, you have the centralizing tendencies, where there is the federal supremacy. On the other hand, there is the state autonomy, where state enjoy the autonomous powers or the independent powers. And in between lies the harmonious construction. So at the end, along with the conclusion, or if you decide to just give the way forward, so way forward आपके पॉइंट में आएंगे, यहाँ पे आपका डायग्राम आएगा. This is federal supremacy. This is your state autonomy, and this is harmonious construction, which is balancing both. ठीक है. Apart from this, the definition of the concepts, and this is going to be your X factor into the. ठीक है. Is this clear? The structuring and conclusion. Again, you can use the same Rajiv Bhargava quote, और थोड़ा सा अगर वे फॉरवर्ड टाइप आपको अगर कंक्लूजन देना है तो द कोट ऑफ जस्टिस चंद्रचूड़. ठीक है. दैट आल्सो आई हैव इनकॉर्पोरेटेड इनटू द एक्स वेक्टर. ठीक है. सो इज द स्ट्रक्चर क्लियर? यस. ऑल राइट. सो नाउ इफ यू सी, this is the answer. So introduction. As per Ivor Jennings, India is the federation with strong centralizing tendency, and the seventh schedule is the reflection of this tendency, because it is talking about legislative powers, or the legislative power division is a reflection of this tendency. Okay. Then you are heading contentious issues regarding distribution of powers. So what are the contentious issues? Concurrent list first. Okay, key. Where there is a conflict, the center's neat law versus Tamil Nadu's opposition to it. Second contentious issues is residuary powers in with the union. If you want to provide the comparison in US, it lies with states. ठीक है. यूएस को बॉक्स कर दो. ठीक है. देन राज्यसभा can empower parliament to legislate on the state subjects. Because of contentious issues in legislative powers, these are the major issues. And during national emergency presidential rule, parliament can legislate on state subjects. So as far as the legislative power divisions are concerned, these. Okay, so on these similar lines, जैसे I had told it in, I think, one of the lecture also. So federalism power division is on legislative, executive, or administrative, and financial. Yeah, this is also given in the Lakshmikant. So major issues in legislative power division, they have asked. You can get question on any one of these two. Okay, so you need to remember major contentious issues in administrative and financial federalism. Okay, this after contentious issues. This part, if you want, you can use a flow chart also, because this is implicit demand. Then principle of federal emergency. Okay, so what is the definition of it? In case of irreconcilable conflict, union law prevails over state law. Okay. And these are the Supreme Court judgments related to it. Yeah, HS Dillon case, Parliament has residuary powers. State of Bengal versus Union of India SC upheld Parliament power to acquire state property. Then Rahman Sheikh case, central money laundering law overrides conflicting state laws. In State of Karnataka versus Union primacy is matter of national importance. So here, through Supreme Court judgment, federal supremacy is clearly established. That is what the demand of the question is. Then comes the one single point of justification you can give. It protects. You need to recall the judgments. There is no alternative. Okay, it's completely fine. You are able to recall just 3 of it. ठीक है, या फिर अगर दो भी कर लिए तो भी चलेगा, बिकॉज ऑलरेडी intro and this part, implicit demand part, it is static, it will cover half of your page. Then 2 points are already there. This is 1 point, this is the justification point. Okay, so even if you are able to recall just 2 points or two judgments, that will be fine. So 4 points will be there, and same goes with this. Okay, principle of harmonious construction. So reconcile conflict so that both union and state can function simultaneously. Definition. And these are the थ्री मेजर जजमेंट्स. ठीक है, दस. तो इसमें से आपको दो भी अगर याद आ गए देन ऑल्सो इट इज फाइन. जस्टिफिकेशन कि प्रिजर्व फेडरल बैलेंस एंड सेफगार्ड स्टेट ऑटोनॉमी. ठीक है, this. And at the end you can provide the table with issues way forward. Yeah. What are the major issues? One, state opposition. Example, farm laws. ठीक है, then second, politicization of governor office. Example, pocket veto over state bills. Okay, this is also in the legislative domain only, no? Okay, then way forward, we revise seventh schedule to include emerging domains like data privacy, cyber security, या फिर simply privacy, cyber security, etc. And the second is again institutional, to strengthen interstate council as an institution of cooperative federalism. Okay, so at least this much you can do. And in worst case scenario, if you don't even know the judgments, okay, then also at least provide this part and this part. Okay, and simply state एक पॉइंट लिख दो, जेनरिक पॉइंट कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट इन वेरियस जजमेंट्स uphold the state's right or with respect to the law making. ठीक है, और recent this that judgment with respect to the governor's veto power, that judgment also you can use as the example. ठीक है, Supreme Court through its various judgments has protected the legislative powers of the state. Example, judgment on governor's veto. Yes, deemed as a drama. Okay, that example also you can give. Okay, then issues way forward are there. In conclusion, this is the quote of Justice Chandrachud. Okay, federalism is not a monolith. It is dialogue between self-rule and shared rule. Self-rule is basically autonomy. Shared rule is basically the federalism. ठीक है, both union and state must act in synergy. इतना भी कंक्लूजन दे दिया तो भी चलेगा. ठीक है, and along with it you also have the diagram. Even if you don't know the judgments, you can compensate by this. Ideally you should know the judgments. Clear है? So now, जैसे कि मैंने कहा, your NYQs are on this expected question. So इसके related दो SC judgments नोट डाउन कर लो बस. ठीक है, इज दिस क्लियर? All right. Next is second. How here, if you see in this particular question, how far do you think cooperation, competition, confrontation has shaped nature of federation in India? Cite recent examples to validate your answer. ठीक है, अब यहाँ पे how far directive is meaningless in this question. Okay, even if they would have given discuss how cooperation, competition, confrontation had shaped or examine how cooperation, यहाँ पे directive is irrelevant because आपका structure will remain the same. Okay, how far do you think is when where you will be or you should give arguments in favor and arguments against. Okay, in this question, how far do you think cooperation, competition, confrontation have shaped federation? That means ideally your structure should have been these three shaping the federation. That would be first heading and second heading. Other factors shaping the federation. So how far means this far, and beyond that, these factors. So that should have been the structure, but I said this directive is irrelevant because there are no other factors beyond these three. ठीक है, यही तीन factors. So that directive here becomes irrelevant. So simple. In this question, again, introduction. It is talking about all the three aspects of the central federalism. That is centralizing tendencies, unitary tendencies, and unitary, federal, and cooperative tendencies. All three it is talking about. So आपका यहाँ पे introduction will come of Rajiv Bhargava. As per Rajiv Bhargava, Indian federalism is multi-layered federalism. Multi-layered means one layer of cooperation, one layer of competition, one layer of confrontation, and one more layer of sub-federalism. That is the local bodies. Okay, so involving cooperation, competition, and confrontation. This is how you need to pick which quote you are going to use in which question. Randomly कोई भी नहीं उठाना है. ठीक है. This now comes simple cooperation, competition, confrontation. Three headings will be there. You can give the examples of these. Okay, so cooperation, bargaining federalism will be part of competitive federalism and confrontational federalism. Okay, bargaining is basically works in the coalition governments where the central government is dependent upon the regional parties. So regional parties get bargaining power. This, if you see in last two budgets post Lok Sabha elections, maximum allocation has been or has gone to Andhra Pradesh and Bihar. Okay, because of their support to the central government. So that is bargaining federalism. So that will come in confrontational or competitive federalism. Okay, so cooperation, building cooperative federalism, GST Council is your example. Niti Aayog, the policy collaboration on health, education, climate. Okay, national education policy or national health policy, both you can give. Designed through center state consultations and COVID-19 pandemic joint management of lockdown, vaccination drives, health protocols. Beyond that, you can also give centrally sponsored schemes which are depend upon the cooperation, where central designs this scheme and state implements this scheme. Okay. So that can also be the example of your cooperative federalism. Then competitive federalism is basically competition works at two levels, between center and state and between states. So competition, again, ease of doing business rankings by Department of DPIIT, state competing to attract investment, then investment summits by the state, example Vibrant Gujarat, then Niti Aayog indices like SDG index, and tourism branding like Kerala ecotourism, MP wildlife tourism, etc. That is also the example of competitive federalism. ठीक है, एंड कन्फ्रंटेशनल, अगेन यहाँ पे जजमेंट्स भी आप दे सकते हो, या फिर 3 लेवल पे आप दे सकते हो. लेजिस्लेटिव डोमेन, confrontation is with respect to the opposition to central laws. Example, Punjab opposition to farm laws. ठीक है. Second, executive domain. Executive domain में basically states like West Bengal revoking the general consent to CBI, or the deployment of central forces in states. Or third, allegation of misuse of central agencies. ठीक है. And financial domain, Kerala going to Supreme Court over these central imposing this restrictions on borrowing, against central restrictions on borrowing under Article 293. ठीक है. और North versus South divide and allocation, or Finance Commission allocation. ठीक है. This. Apart from that, the recent examples on the conflict over, yes, GST compensation is also there. Then conflict over delimitation, the opposition of southern states to delimitation. That example also you can give. So this year you can get question on the confrontation aspect itself. So these are the major examples. Okay. So the examples again, Delhi government tussle over control of services. Farm laws, again state like Punjab opposed union laws. Then NEET and education policy, Tamil Nadu opposing the all one nation, one test. Governor state conflicts frequent in Kerala, West Bengal and Tamil Nadu over assent to bills. यहाँ पे बस आर्टिकल मेंशन करो, आर्टिकल 201, 200 and 201. ठीक है. This. Now, how many of you ended your answer with this, or simply provided the way forward after this and concluded it? Yes. Majority of you must have done that. The same. Right. But you missed out on the next part of the question, which is how it had shaped the nature of federation. ये कौन बताएगा? This part, how it had shaped the nature of federation. So basically analysis of all three aspects. Okay, so the first aspect is confrontation, competition, cooperation. So confrontation allows raising local or state issues. So Tamil Nadu on NEET. Then acts as check on centralization. Because जैसे in original GST, state center agreed for GST compensation. So it acts as a check, or these this farm laws, the government taking back the farm laws. Or third, leads to judicial clarification. Example, with respect to the SC decision on article or governor's veto powers. because this confrontation shapes federation in this way. ठीक है, competition shapes federation by bringing best from the states. ठीक है, then sparks policy innovations. इसमें कोई भी एग्जांपल आप दे सकते हैं. ठीक है, छत्तीसगढ़ पीडीएस रिफॉर्म्स. ठीक है, एंड बेंचमार्क गवर्नेंस. एग्जांपल केरला डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन मॉडल और कुडुम्बश्री मॉडल. ठीक है, which was replicated in other state. So this shapes your federation in this way. And cooperation essential for federal functioning. Example, GST Council enables welfare delivery. जैसे central sector, centrally sponsored schemes, and preserves unity in diversity. So how it shapes the federation, that part you missed. ठीक है, ये part that was your X factor into this answer. ठीक है, and conclusion you can use the same quote. Monolith, both must act in synergy. And जो पिछले वाला डायग्राम मैंने दिया था that was also relevant here. ठीक है, या फिर way forward से you can conclude. Implementing the recommendations of सरकारिया, एक ब्रैकेट एक रिकमेंडेशन ये कर लो. ठीक है, एंड पंची इसमें ब्रैकेट में एक रिफॉर्म कर दो, इज इसेंशियल फॉर स्ट्रेंथनिंग फेडरलिज्म. दिस इज ऑल्सो फाइन. ठीक है, या फिर कल जैसा. यस, नो यू डोंट हैव टू पैक एवरीथिंग. ठीक है, सो कोऑपरेशन यू गिव जस्ट 3 to 4 एग्जांपल्स. 3 examples you give. Competition you give 3 examples. Confrontation you give 3 examples. ये तो मैंने आपके कंटेंट के लिए दिया है फॉर वैल्यू एडिशन. ठीक है, सो यू गिव 3 examples हियर एंड एनालिसिस में यू कैन गिव अदर एग्जांपल्स. ठीक है, so in analysis again 2 points would suffice for each. Easily you can fact, and that is why separately I haven't given way forward. Okay, I have directly concluded the answer because the core demand of the question is that how it has shaped nature of federation. ठीक है, is this clear? Then next, अब इस पे I just tweaked a question bit because the original question was on 14th Finance Commission. पॉजिटिव निगेटिव शेप मत करो, फिर आपके टोटल 3 टेबल बनेंगे. अंडर कोऑपरेशन यू कैन हैव पॉजिटिव निगेटिव, अंडर कन्फ्रंटेशन यू विल हैव पॉजिटिव निगेटिव, अंडर कंपटीशन यू विल हैव पॉजिटिव निगेटिव. ठीक है, तो कंपटीशन के भी निगेटिव होते हैं, जैसे रेस टू द बॉटम. ठीक है, डेवलप्ड वर्सेस डेवलपिंग दिस बीमारू स्टेट्स, दैट विल बी द नेगेटिव ऑफ कॉम्पिटिटिव फेडरलिज्म. बट वो बहुत उतना जरूरी नहीं है. दैट वे ऑल्सो यू कैन दिस. अब ये PYQ 14 फाइनेंस कमीशन का था. आई हैव जस्ट ट्विक्ड इट अ बिट. सो ये इस पे आपका क्वेश्चन दिस ईयर इट कैन कम आइदर ऑन GS2 और GS3, दोनों में आ सकता है. ठीक है, सो कॉन्स्टिट्यूटेड अंडर आर्टिकल 280 ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, फाइनेंस कमीशन एक्ट्स एज अ बैलेंसिंग व्हील ऑफ फिस्कल फेडरलिज्म. just remember this keyword. ठीक है, और this can be the standard introduction, article plus keyword, or other introduction that you can give is the finance commission is the unique feature of India. ठीक है, जितने भी फेडरेशन से वर्ल्ड में there are no finance commission. Unlike the majority part of the federalism या फिर for constitution which we have taken from others. ठीक है, the finance commission is our own innovation. There is no finance commission in US, UK or anywhere. So that fact also you can use as the introduction. Okay. Then recommendations of Finance Commission. This again, this I have taken from the extractor only. Vertical devolution, horizontal, and other key recommendations. Again, इसमें maximum what you can do is, along with this, you can add the graph. Okay. There can be two graphs or pie charts that you can add. I will post it into the group. One is here, how it improves the state's fiscal position. So basically, it improves fiscal position by giving them more money. ठीक है, that's a standard. So यहाँ पे आपका एक ग्राफ आएगा where you can highlight the 13, 14, 15 and 16 का डिवोल्यूशन. ये नहीं आएगा एक्चुअली बिकॉज 15 से कम डिवोल्यूशन हुआ है 16 में. ठीक है, so this graph won't come. Here you can give the pie chart with respect to the share of weightage. So income, distance, population, उसका weightage जो है उसका pie chart you can add here. I have that pie chart. I will put it in the group. I forgot to add here. Okay. Then role of finance, role of FC in improving the state's fiscal position. Okay. Again, here just remember one thing. This is a one pattern of the question where UPSC first asks you the factual information and second it asks you the analysis of the same. Okay. So here you can use two approaches with respect to the structure. Okay. First, you can make a table where here you can give the recommendations and impact on state fiscal position. ठीक है, जैसे within vertical devolution 41% share to the states. So the impact is predictable and stable flow of funds. Okay. Second, union to disclose tax certified data on net tax proceeds. Okay. Analysis brings transparency regarding cess and surcharge. Okay. Recommended merging cess into divisible pool. Okay. The analysis increasing share to the states. Okay. Then introduction of 10% weight for GDP contribution, shift from equity to efficiency. Okay. So this one you can use. Ideally, topper would use this structure. Okay. Where you will put the recommendation, facts, this. अब ये किसी के भी ऊपर आ सकता है. ठीक है. So discuss or analyze the this impact of कोई भी स्कीम का. अब 16 फाइनेंस कमीशन हो या फिर बाकी ऐसे भी कोई आए कि where they are asking you the facts and its analysis in the same question, you can go for the table format. Okay, so recommendations and impact on the fiscal position. खास करके आर्ट एंड कल्चर में ये हाईलाइट द इन्फ्लुएंस ऑफ चोला आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर या फिर चोला टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर. ठीक है, सो ऑन द लेफ्ट हैंड साइड फीचर्स ऑफ चोला टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर, राइट हैंड साइड its influence or impact. Okay, if you have that level of the precise content, you can go for this format. That is definitely going to give you one extra mark. If not, our standard format, first give the facts, then give the analysis. Okay, which is what I have used. So these are the facts on the 16th Finance Commission. So role in improving state fiscal position. Again, the predictable transfer. Retaining 51% share for 5 years. या फिर अगर ये फैक्ट आपको रिपीट नहीं करना है, सिंपली इंश्योर्स स्टेबल एंड प्रिडिक्टेबल ट्रांसफर्स टू दी स्टेट्स. ठीक है. देन रिवॉर्डिंग परफॉर्मेंस. So 10% weightage for GDP contribution incentivizes states. ठीक है. Yes, so if you use the table format, so these two headings will be integrated. No, this will be this heading and this will be this heading. So it will be just table. Those separate headings won't come. Hmm, That so this then local bodies increasing grants to the local bodies. If you don't want to repeat the same content, the increasing grant to the local bodies reduce pressure on the from the state budgets. Okay. Then increasing disaster management corpus ensures emergency funding to the states. Okay. These 4 to 5 are fine. Then brings the fiscal discipline, capping deficit at 3% of gross state GDP reduces the service burden. Okay, so this 5 would suffice. And then थोड़े से, अब this is non implicit demand because यहाँ पे उन्होंने ये नहीं पूछा है how far. If they would have asked how far, then these two would have been 50-50 weightage. यहाँ पे 5 पॉइंट आपको देने पड़ते, यहाँ पे 5 पॉइंट देने पड़ते. But they have asked it how it improves. Means थोड़ा ज्यादा वेटेज इसको आएगा. कंसर्न्स यू कैन यूज डायग्राम. नॉर्थ साउथ इक्विटी गैप, then this discontinuation of revenue deficit grant can hit northeastern and hilly states. The rise of cess and surcharge. ठीक है. 3 या 4 जैसे CSS burden. State provide 40% funds for schemes designed by central government. And 1 या 2 वे फॉरवर्ड आप दे सकते हो, और यू कैन कंबाइन दीज टू इन टेबल. दिस इज ऑल्सो फाइन. इन कंक्लूजन, thus 16 Finance Commission steers state towards compliance driven, performance oriented fiscal era. ठीक है. So is the structuring part clear for this particular question? There are 2 to 3 ways in which you can structure this answer. Okay, the ideal way is the table way. So if you use the table, you can use one entire page or 1.25 page for the first 2 parts, and you will get sufficient space for these two also. Okay. That in context of state finances, you can give, if you want the data or graph, if you have the graph with respect to the state finances, with respect to the highest fiscal deficits or debt burden, that you can mention here as a fact file on state finances. That also you can add. That is also fine. You'll get that data in when we will do GS3 paper. Yeah, again, there are multiple ways in which multiple things that you can add, because that is also not incorrect. Okay. Next, the growth of cabinet system has resulted in the marginalization of parliamentary supremacy. So this is the question on parliament. ठीक है. Elucidate बोला है, तो maximum weightage you need to give for explaining how cabinet system marginalizes parliamentary supremacy. ठीक है. अब यहाँ पे if you feel you don't have much of the content in the main body, थोड़ा सा introduction you can stretch. ठीक है. This if you have sufficient amount of the content, you limit your introduction to this. ठीक है, ये भी आता होगा. And simply mention article. If the cabinet system is based upon the principle of collective responsibility of executive to legislature. ठीक है, यही पे you can stop your introduction. That is also completely fine. First, then simple cabinet system marginalizing parliamentary supremacy. ठीक है, another way in which you can do this is, as this is a concept, you can define parliamentary supremacy. ठीक है, so the parliamentary supremacy bracket यूके मॉडल, यूके मॉडल को बॉक्स करो. ठीक है, is a form of government where legislature has overriding powers over judiciary and executive. ठीक है, however, in India, the parliament enjoys limited power. ठीक है, that also can be the introduction. And then cabinet system marginalizing parliamentary supremacy. Again, it controls legislative agenda, reducing parliament to rubber stamp. ठीक है, अब यहाँ पे there is this graph which has to come in any question related to the parliament. The number of bills sent to the parliamentary committees, which itself is the reflection of decline of the parliament. Okay, so how cabinet system, that is executive, how it controls parliament? First, agenda setting. Second, the whip system, which curtails independence of MPs. Third, ordinance power, bypass legislative scrutiny. Example, farm roads or farm bills. Okay, fourth, again cabinet system बोला है तो PMO, with prime ministerial supremacy due to centralization of authority in PMO. Again, specifically in foreign policy matters. ठीक है, because of this supremacy वो melody वगैरह दे सकता. If there would have been the parliamentary scrutiny of that, the executive wouldn't have done such actions. Okay, so clear supremacy in specifically in foreign policy matters. And then decline of private member bills. This is the corollary to this. Basically, executive controls the legislative agenda, and because of that, parliament bill is on decline. So last such bill was passed in 1970, or only I think 14 bills were passed. 14 private member bills were passed. Okay, then parliament के issues, lack of legislative scrutiny, increased absenteeism, fewer sittings, and guillotine. Then one more is the politicization of office of speaker. You get that. And as an example, the mass suspension of opposition MPs in 2023. Again, that is also the important fact. And then you come to the second part. थोड़ा सा counter argument दे दो. ठीक है, has marginalization? Yes, that is delegated legislation also you can give as the example. Yes, excessive delegated legislation. अब हर जगह पे टेबल मत लाओ. ठीक है, कि showing its effect on decline of parliament. क्या एक ही तो इफेक्ट है, decline of parliament itself is an effect. उसमें और क्या ही दोगे. ठीक है, lack of functioning, decline, lack of debate, यही रहेगा. ये सेपरेट पॉइंट्स आपके नहीं आएंगे. नो. एंड देन As a counter argument, however, parliamentary control over the executive can also be seen in this collective responsibility under, तो इसका एग्जाम्पल एनसीएम अगेंस्ट गवर्नमेंट in 2025. This no confidence motion. The second, financial committee scrutinizing government expenditure, back review of GST framework, and budgetary control to demands for grants and appropriation act, or through debates and discussion. ठीक है, और इसका भी the recent example where parliament was able to control the executive in recent times, and there is just one example, that is failure of, what was that amendment, 131st amendment, right, with respect to delimitation. What was that amendment number, the amendment which failed recently? 131, yes, 131st amendment bill. Okay, this is the only recent example where parliament was able to control the executive. So this should have been there into your answer. Okay, and then way forward, 2 से 3, the shadow cabinet model of UK, where the shadow executive will control the real executive. Then with respect to the private member bills, and you can parliament के basically जो भी way forward है, you can give any. Okay, in conclusion, parliament is the keystone of democratic arc, thus it needs to be revitalized. ठीक है, or thus reforms in the temple of democracy is needed in order to hold the executive accountable, or promote deliberative democracy, or strengthen Indian parliamentary democracy. ठीक है, this one quote or temple of democracy quote also you can use. Okay, now the next, the changes introduced in center-state relations suggest measures to build trust between center and state for strengthening federalism. ठीक है, this, so here अब the recent changes, so recent changes to basically they are asked in a positive manner, and the recent changes are basically in the spirit of cooperative, competitive federalism, the spirit of Team India. So I quote will use of Granville Austin, India is cooperative model where center and states are bound in seamless web to achieve socio-economic revolution. The recent changes highlight the spirit of competitive cooperative federalism. ठीक है, this, अगर ये 10 मार्कर क्वेश्चन होता और हमें 2 लाइन का ही इंट्रोडक्शन देना होता, we would have given only this introduction because that directly correlates with the theme of the question. ठीक है, हम फिर वो 5 लाइन का इंट्रोडक्शन नहीं. ठीक है, then recent changes again as per our federalism classification. So changes in legislative domain, executive or administrative, and financial. So legislative farm acts in agriculture under concurrent list. Then this is with respect to the Lieutenant General powers in Delhi, and all India service rules amended. Greater control over the this all India services, or strengthening central control over all India services. ठीक है, then executive pandemic handling, जो पहला पॉइंट हमने लिखा था कोऑपरेटिव फेडरलिज्म मॉडल का, वही आप लिखोगे. ठीक है, देन रिवाइवल ऑफ इंटरस्टेट काउंसिल इन 2024, नीति आयोग रिप्लेसिंग प्लानिंग कमीशन. ठीक है, सो कोऑपरेटिव फेडरलिज्म के जो पॉइंट्स थे वो इसमें आएंगे. एंड फाइनेंशियल, 16 फाइनेंस कमीशन, with respect to the new devolution formula. Okay, GST Council, it extended the GST compensation cess. ठीक है, अब ये ended है, and rise in cess and surcharge share increase from 10.4% to 20%. ठीक है, and with respect to the borrowing, it links to the reforms under FRBM under Article 290. And then you briefly highlight the issues again on the same lines: financial issues, administrative issues, and legislative issues. The encroachment on the state list, governor's appointment, control over all India services, misuse of central agencies, then delay in GST compensation, then Finance Commission terms of reference, use of 2011 census penalizing southern states, then this cess and surcharge not shared with states. After that, you go with way forward. Measures, simple, mention the committees. Sarkaria Commission recommendations, Panchi Commission recommendations, NCRWC recommendations, and second ARC. Apart from that, you can also add global best practices. Okay. So within global best practices, majorly US model. Okay, where allowing states to introduce constitutional amendment. Okay. Then ensuring this equality in state representation in Rajya Sabha. तो दैट ऑल्सो यू कैन ऐड. अदरवाइज जो एक्स फैक्टर में कमिटी बेसिस पे रिकमेंडेशंस दी है वही रिकमेंडेशंस यहाँ पे आएंगे. इन कंक्लूजन अगेन इट इज related to federalism, so same quote you can conclude: is not a federal monolith, dialogue between self-rule and shared rule. Thus, it needs to be exercised with consultation and cooperation. Say you can conclude. ठीक है, इज दिस क्लियर? अब इसमें इफ यू वांट जो एक्स फैक्टर में मैंने सेस एंड सरचार्ज वाला ग्राफ डाला है, तो इंक्रीजिंग शेयर ऑफ सेस एंड सरचार्ज, दैट यू कैन ऐड हियर, सो दैट कैन एक्ट एज योर एक्स फैक्टर. अदरवाइज दिस क्लासिफिकेशन एंड यूज ऑफ स्कॉलर्स इटसेल्फ इज सफिशिएंट. उसके बियॉन्ड फिर दूसरा नहीं लगेगा. ठीक है, ओके. देन next, significance of GST Amendment Act. To what extent does it reflect accommodative spirit of federalism? So to what extent पूछा है. ठीक है, so यहाँ पे significance of GST Act. First, to what extent reflecting accommodative spirit, so reflective of cooperative federalism and issues. Okay, simple. This, so introduction. GST was introduced in 2017 and aimed at creating one nation, one tax, one market. Okay, so significance, unified taxation system. अब यही पे you add the graph with respect to the increasing GST collection. 2025-26 wala bhi you can add. How it has increased the revenue collection. So unified taxation system is subsumed 17 central, state and 23 cesses, removing cascading effects. Expansion of tax base, revenue growth, economic efficiency, ease of doing business by removing the multiplicity of the taxes. One, the recent GST rationalization. On that, as per NK Singh, the GST 2.0 has potential to trigger virtuous cycle by boosting demand. इतना भी आपने लिख दिया तो भी चले, ठीक है। दीज आर द पॉइंट्स ऑन द सिग्निफिकेंस. Only remember this because GST pay again either on GS2 or in GS3 you can expect a question to the data. Okay. Then the accommodative spirit. Okay, accommodative spirit basically cooperative federalism. So cooperative federalism में क्या? Basically center also gave up its some of its powers. State also gave up some of its taxation powers. Second, GST council. ठीक है. Third, maximum weightage to the states in GST council. Okay. Fourth, compensation cess in order to compensate for the revenue losing states. Okay. And fifth is some special provisions. The petroleum alcohol kept outside GST respecting states revenue or respecting state revenue needs. Okay. So institutionalizing of cooperative federalism. So institutionalization through GST council. Okay. Then pooled sovereignty, where both union and state share taxing powers under 246A, reflecting co-ownership. Third, balanced federal approach, dual GST, central GST plus this state GST. Integrate economies while maintaining state autonomy. Okay. Then fiscal balance through compensation cess. And special provision to respect state autonomy. These are the keywords. Institutionalization of fiscal federalism, cooperative या fiscal federalism, pooled sovereignty, then balanced federal approach, then special provisions. Just these keywords will give you extra 0.5. Then the same challenges as in GST. The complex multi-tier rate structure increases compliance burden. Frequent rate revisions affect business stability. Then GST council deciding to do away with compensation cess. And revenue shortfall weakens state finances and central dominance. The weighted voting gives center 33% and majority required is of 75%. So this gives central a virtual veto. Okay. Then you give the way forward. Way forward में first with respect to GST anti-profiteering authority. Okay. Then periodic technological upgrades in GST and strengthening the dispute redressal mechanism within GST council. Okay. This and then conclusion. Supreme Court judgment. Mohit Minerals case. GST council are not binding. Okay. Reaffirming Indian federalism is based on cooperation, not coercion or confrontation or coercion. Okay. Despite not being binding, both center and state are adhering to its recommendations. Okay. That reflects basically the accommodative spirit of Indian federalism. Okay. So this is how you will conclude. Again, federalism question everyone is going to write. But you just need to bring in this much of the depth. और इसमें इसलिए मैंने कोई डायग्राम्स या फिर प्रेजेंटेशन वगैरह ज्यादा नहीं बताया आपको बिकॉज ओनली ऑन द कंटेंट डेप्थ यू विल गेट मार्क्स ऑन फेडरलिज्म पार्लियामेंट लोकल बॉडीज एक्सेट्रा डेटा. ठीक है. द लास्ट क्वेश्चन इज essential conditions for exercise of legislative powers by governor, legality of repromulgation of ordinance by governor without placing them before the legislature. ठीक है. So first part again very easy. अब ये 15 मार्कर है. ठीक है. So before if you see the question essential conditions. That is your first demand to exercise legislative powers. What will be the essential demand first? If it is recommended by the State Council of Ministers. Second, in case of ordinance, if the state assemblies are not in session. Third, the constitutional limitations. Certain bills must be preserved for the assent by the president. Fourth is constitutional discretion, where he feels that certain bills should be reserved for the president. These are the essential conditions. Again, all static. Now, we discuss the legality. Ideally, the directive should have been examined the legality. Okay, or discussing legality of repromulgation of ordinances by governor without placing them before legislature. So ideally, first we will add constitutional provisions, and then with respect to legality, SC judgments. Okay. So basically, there are only two demands in this question. Okay. So first, introduction with respect to the state executive, Article 153 to 167, and governor act as the chief executive. And Article 213 under governor has power to promulgate ordinances. Okay. This then legislative powers, constitutional provisions. Yes, so with respect to the governor, legislative, executive, governor or president, दोनों के all the articles you need to know. ठीक है, intro के बाद immediately वो डाल देना है, even if it is 10 marker, 15 marker, doesn't matter. Generally, it helps in the static questions. ठीक है, कि जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल एक क्वेश्चन था कि डिस्कस द रोल ऑफ वाइस प्रेसिडेंट एज द चेयरमैन ऑफ राज्यसभा. ठीक है, दैट वाज कंप्लीटली फैक्चुअल क्वेश्चन. सो हैविंग द होल्ड ओवर द आर्टिकल्स इज इंपॉर्टेंट. ठीक है, देन essential conditions. Yeah, the first, it should have been this advice of Council of Ministers to give assent to the bill or withhold. So this is one of the essential conditions because governor acts on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Second, if legislature is not in session, okay, the ordinance can be issued when both houses are not in session or sole house is not in session. Third, when he is satisfied that there is immediate need. Okay, basically that is the criteria for the ordinances, where governor is satisfied that the conditions are such that ordinance is needed. And it can be reviewed in the Supreme Court only on that line, whether those conditions demand immediate action or not. Okay. Third, the legislative competence ordinance can be issued only within the state subject. Then certain bills are required to be reserved for presidential assent if these bills. Okay. So these are the essential conditions for legislative action by the governor. Then legality. First, you provide the constitutional provisions. It must be passed. Actually, I have given it here. The ordinance must be laid before the legislature and will cease to operate within 6 weeks after the reassembly. Actually, that part should have been here. Okay, so constitutional provision and then legal precedents. DC Wadhwa case where Supreme Court held that repromulgation without legislative approval is the fraud on the Constitution. ठीक है, this. And secondly, it also held that the ordinance can be challenged if it constitutes colorable legislation. Colorable legislation means the you put a different objective, but your actual intention is different. Yes. Second, it violates fundamental rights. It contravenes constitutional provision and it has unconstitutional retrospective effect. These are the guidelines that Supreme Court has given. So as far as major Supreme Court guidelines with respect to federalism, SR Bommai guidelines with respect to the office of governor, I think Nabim Revia case is there. The guidelines issued there. And third, DC Wadhwa. The Supreme Court guidelines issued in these three cases you need to know. Yeah. कोई भी question में you can utilize. ठीक है. Then Krishna Kumar Singh, Supreme Court held that placing the ordinance before legislature is mandatory. And RC Cooper case, judicial review is permissible if there is no genuine requirement of immediate action. Okay. Then briefly you can give the analysis of it. It violates 3D principle of parliamentary democracy, that is debate, discussion, deliberate. Okay. And then it erodes the separation of power. ये briefly diagram करके भी ऐसे कर सकते हो. Violates 3D. Debate, discussion, deliberation and violate separation of powers. ठीक है. और undermines SOP, undermines executive accountability to parliament. ठीक है. So this. And then way forward, mandatory legislative review within fixed time frame. Then transparency in justification. The governor's satisfaction for issuing ordinance should be recorded in writing and made public. And third, adherence to the constitutional morality. By using it only in genuine emergencies. These many are sufficient. Okay. And then conclusion. Isuli Solabji, governors can be driving force for democracy only when they respect principles of separation of power and constitutional propriety. यहाँ फिर first part. Thus, the restraint or there should be the application of constitutional reasoning and restraint in using emergency powers like ordinance. Yeah. Same line of the conclusion we will be using in judiciary. The judicial restraint. So judicial overreach के question में यहाँ पे भी constitutional reasoning and restraint by the governor using emergency powers. So that is the alternative conclusion that you can use. ठीक है. Is this clear? All the questions. So as far as parliament and emergency is concerned, the one major X factor that we will be bringing into your answers is the scholars. The second X factor that you will be bringing into your answer is the graphs and charts. Okay. And the maximization of marks in these questions is only possible with data and examples. Okay. You need to have specific data. Okay. Data static. The article numbers, precise article numbers you should know. Second, the data. Third, examples. एवरीथिंग इज देयर इन द एक्स फैक्टर, और अभी मैंने जो जो दिए हैं यहाँ पे वो सारे, ठीक है। एंड योर फ्रेमवर्क फॉर क्लासिफिकेशन इज दिस विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू द पावर्स, ठीक है। द सेकंड फ्रेमवर्क जो मैंने एक्सपेक्टर नोट्स में दिया है विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू द इश्यूज इन इंडियन फेडरलिज्म, द पाइज अप्रोच, पॉलिटिकल इश्यूज, the institutional issues, all India services, central forces, central agencies, uh, this interstate council, GST council conflicts, ठीक है, economic, fiscal federalism, ठीक है, social, rise of the subnationalism or rise of regional parties versus central parties, ठीक है, कि जैसे opposition to the NEET और opposition to the three language formula, etc. ठीक है, और in Bengal the slogans of Joy Bongla, whatever. ठीक है, that or violence against migrants in states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, that can come into the social factors. ठीक है, so pies is also there, or the second is this. ठीक है, is this clear? Any doubts with respect to the federalism and parliament? Clear? Now coming to the NYQs again, the high probability themes. Okay, one is with respect to the Supreme Court presidential reference or Article 200 and 201. You can get one. Second, the 16th Finance Commission implications on cooperative federalism and autonomy of states. So current affairs related, these two are there. Okay. Third, you can expect a question with respect to the paper leak पे इन्होंने already पूछा है question. Otherwise, paper leak would have been an issue, but the one nation, one test. Okay. You can expect a question on this with respect to the NEET controversy. Should there be one nation, one test, or should there be the state level exams? Probability कम है, but again, random question उन्होंने पूछने का decide किया तो you can get. Okay. Then few questions they can just rephrase the themes. ठीक है, कि जैसे cooperation, competition, confrontation, इन तीनों में से either one they will pick or two they will pick or just one they will pick. ठीक है. Second, key with respect to the GST, again, the recent context end of GST compensation and rate rationalization. Assess whether it reflects or assess its impact on the federalism. Okay, just by rephrasing. Third, last year they asked the question on the Jammu and Kashmir reorganization. Okay, this year similarly on the asymmetric federalism they can ask with respect to either they can link it with demand for special category states or demand for complete statehood by Ladakh, and sixth, schedule status demand by Ladakh. Okay. With respect to the executive, again last year they asked of cabinet, this year they can ask you with respect to the PMO. Okay, the centralization of power in PMO. Okay. Second, the with respect to one nation, one election plus delimitation poses fresh challenge to India's federal balance. Discuss or examine. So north versus south divide. ठीक है. This then the recent interstate border and river state settlements, जिसके एग्जाम्पल मैंने अभी दिया है, highlights maturing of cooperative federalism. You can discuss institutional mechanisms available for such disputes and their limitations. So जैसे zonal councils, आपके interstate council, ठीक है, then GST council, नीति आयोग, all these, ठीक है, या फिर प्राइम मिनिस्टर कॉन्फ्रेंसेस, दिस and their limitations. From these themes, you can expect a question. So when you will revise today, just brainstorm over these questions. No need to write.